It was just another noisy afternoon on a busy street. Cars rolling by, people talking over each other. Footsteps moving in every direction like no one had time to slow down. Most people were focused on where they were going, not what was happening around them. That's usually how it is in places like this. Everything blends together, sound becomes background, faces become a blur. On the corner, a kid stood with a guitar that had clearly been used more than it had been taken care of. Nothing flashy, no crowd, no spotlight. Just a song drifting into the street, mixing with traffic and voices. At first, almost no one noticed. And honestly, why would they? Street music is everywhere, but something about this moment was different, even if no one realized it yet. The kid wasn't rushing. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He played like he had nowhere else to be, like time wasn't pushing him forward. Each note landed softly, almost carefully, as if the song meant something personal, not just something rehearsed. People passed by him without looking. And then, a car nearby came to a stop it hadn't planned to make. Not because of traffic, not because of a signal, but because someone inside heard something familiar and couldn't ignore it. Right there, in the middle of all that noise, a completely normal moment quietly started becoming something else. Have you ever seen a normal moment suddenly turn into something unforgettable? What's strange is how these moments never announce themselves. There's no warning, no dramatic pause. They look ordinary right up until the second they aren't. And most people miss them, not because they don't care, but because they're used to thinking that big things happen fast, loud all at once. But this wasn't fast. It was slow. It had been building without anyone paying attention. The kid didn't know who was listening. He didn't know that someone nearby recognized every note for a reason most people never would. He was just doing what he had done countless times before, showing up, playing, and trusting the process. And that raises a quiet question that most people don't stop to ask. Do you think most people underestimate slow progress or overestimate quick wins? And why? Because right here, on this street, nothing exploded into instant success. Nothing went viral yet. Nothing dramatic happened in that exact second. But something important had already started moving. And once it started, there was no going back. The kid had been coming to this same spot again and again, long before this day mattered to anyone else. Same corner, same routine, same worn guitar case opened just enough to hold a few bills if anyone decided to stop. There was nothing glamorous about it. No guarantee that anyone would listen. No promise that the effort would turn into something bigger. Most days, it didn't. He showed up early, usually before the street got too crowded. Not because it helped him earn more, but because it gave him a few quiet minutes to tune his guitar without feeling rushed. He adjusted the strings carefully, the way you do when you can't afford to replace them easily. The guitar wasn't new. It carried scratches, small dents, and the marks of being moved around too much. But he treated it like it mattered, wiping it down, checking the tuning twice, holding it close when he wasn't playing. People often assume street performers are chasing attention. But this didn't feel like that. This felt like habit, like discipline, like someone showing up because not showing up would feel worse. He didn't scan the crowd for reactions. He didn't stop when people walked past. He didn't look disappointed when no one clapped. He just played. Sometimes someone would slow down. Sometimes a tourist would record a few seconds and move on. Most of the time, nothing happened at all. And still, every week, he came back. What do you think drives someone to keep showing up even when no one is watching? It's easy to admire success once it's visible. It's harder to notice the quiet commitment that exists long before success has a name. This kid wasn't playing for an audience. He was playing because the music gave structure to his days. Because it was something he could control when everything else felt uncertain. For him, progress wasn't measured in applause. It was measured in cleaner transitions between notes. In fewer mistakes than last time. In the feeling that today sounded slightly better than yesterday. That kind of progress is almost invisible from the outside. People walking by couldn't see how long it took him to learn the song. They didn't see the practice sessions that went nowhere. They didn't see the moments where his fingers hurt, or where doubt crept in and asked if any of this was worth it. They just heard another kid playing music on the street, and that's usually where the story ends. But slow progress doesn't look impressive while it's happening. It only looks obvious after the fact, once everything finally connects. That's why so many people walk past moments like this without realizing what they're seeing. Because we're trained to notice quick wins, sudden breakthroughs, instant results. And we miss the long, quiet stretch where someone keeps going without proof that it will pay off. So it's worth stopping for a second and asking, do you think most people underestimate slow progress or overestimate quick wins? And why? Because standing on that corner wasn't a shortcut. It wasn't a lucky break. It was repetition, week after week, note after note, day after day. And whether anyone noticed or not, something was being built there. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. The kind of foundation that only exists because someone kept showing up long before the moment that finally made people pay attention. And that's what makes what happened next matter. Up until now, this moment belonged entirely to the kid, the street, the guitar, the routine. But just a few steps away, inside a car that wasn't planning to stop, someone else was hearing the same sound in a completely different way. For most people, the music blended into the noise of the city. For him, it didn't. It cut through everything. Not because it was flawless, not because it was loud, but because it carried something familiar, something that couldn't be practiced or learned from repetition alone. He'd heard this song thousands of times in his life, in studios, on stages, through speakers, far better than anything on that street. And yet, this version felt different. It wasn't polished. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't protected by distance or lighting. It was exposed. The notes weren't just being played, they were being carried carefully, almost like the kid was holding onto something fragile. That's what made it hard to ignore. For someone who had spent years surrounded by crowds, applause, and expectation, this quiet performance did something unexpected. It slowed everything down. The street didn't feel loud anymore. The schedule didn't feel urgent. The day didn't feel routine. It's strange how perspective works like that. The kid was focused on getting through the song. The listener was focused on what the song meant. Same moment. Two completely different experiences. And it raises a deeper question. Do you think art hits harder when it comes from struggle? Or when it comes from experience? Because one side brings raw emotion. The other brings understanding. And here, they were meeting without either one trying to impress the other. What stood out wasn't talent alone, it was sincerity. The kind that reminds you why something mattered in the first place, before it became work, or expectation, or routine. And maybe that's why this moment felt heavier than it should have, because the kid didn't know who was listening. And the listener didn't expect to feel anything at all. It was just sound drifting across a street. But moments like this don't come from shortcuts. They don't come from instant results. They come from showing up quietly, again and again, long before anyone important notices. Which brings us back to something worth asking. Do you think most people underestimate slow progress or overestimate quick wins? And why? Because what caught attention here wasn't a viral moment. It was everything that came before it. The hours no one saw. The effort no one recorded. The patience that didn't demand a reward. And standing there, listening, it became clear that this wasn't just a song being played on a street. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments don't announce themselves. They just wait for the right perspective to notice them. And once that perspective shifts, everything that happens next carries a completely different weight. The song came to a natural pause, not a dramatic ending, not the kind that demands attention. Just a quiet moment where the last note fades and hangs in the air a second longer than expected. The kid lowered his hands slightly, still holding the guitar the way you do when you're not sure if you're done yet. He hadn't looked up the entire time. When he finally did, he noticed someone standing closer than before. Not too close, not invasive, just close enough to show intent. There was no rush in the way the man approached. No announcement. No signal to the crowd that anything important was about to happen. He waited until the music had fully settled, as if stepping in too early would break something fragile. Around them, people began to notice. A few whispers. Phones slowly raised, but not confidently, more out of instinct than certainty. The kid didn't recognize what everyone else was starting to realize. To him, this was just another adult stopping to listen. Another stranger in a city full of them. The first words exchanged were simple, calm, almost casual. There was no performance in the voice, no need to establish authority, just genuine acknowledgement, the kind that feels more personal than praise. The kid froze for a second, trying to process what he was hearing. His grip on the guitar tightened slightly, not from fear, but from disbelief. You could see the moment where reality lagged behind understanding. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not like this. The crowd grew quieter. Not because they were told to, but because they sensed that interrupting would be wrong. This wasn't a show yet. It was a conversation. And that's what made it powerful. Two people from completely different worlds standing on the same piece of sidewalk, speaking like nothing else existed around them. If you were watching from a few steps back, you could feel the tension, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that comes from witnessing something real and not knowing whether to step in or step away. Which makes you wonder, if you were in that moment, would you speak up or just watch it unfold? Because moments like this don't feel scripted when you're inside them. They feel uncertain, unfinished. The kid didn't know where to stand or what to say next. The man didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he sat down, right there, same level, samey ground. No hierarchy, no spectacle. That single choice said more than anything else could have. The guitar passed from one set of hands to another, carefully, respectfully, like it mattered. Not because of what it was worth, but because of what it represented. And again, nothing dramatic happened. No big announcement. No instant transformation. Just conversation. Just listening. Which brings us back to a question that quietly hangs over moments like this. Do you think most people underestimate slow progress, or overestimate quick wins, and why? Because what made this interaction meaningful wasn't how fast it happened, it was how long it had been building. Years of learning, weeks of repetition, days of showing up without recognition. All of that led to a few minutes on a sidewalk where someone finally stopped. Not because they had to, but because they felt something was worth paying attention to. And standing there, watching this exchange, it became clear that this wasn't the peak of the moment. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Something shifted after the conversation settled. Nothing around them had changed. The street was still loud. People were still moving. Cars still passed by. But the meaning of the moment had quietly transformed. The song wasn't just a song anymore. For the kid, it had always been personal. A way to process feelings he didn't have words for yet. A place to put emotions that didn't fit anywhere else. When he played it, he wasn't thinking about technique or performance. He was thinking about memories, about absence, about holding on to something that felt like it could slip away if he didn't keep playing. But now, sitting there with someone who knew the song from the inside out, the meaning expanded. What once felt private suddenly felt shared. The same notes carried two different lives, two different histories, two different reasons for existing, and either one canceled the other out. That's what made the moment heavy in a quiet way. The kid realized he wasn't alone in what the song represented. And the listener realized the song had grown beyond where it started. That realization doesn't arrive loudly. It settles in slowly. You could see it in the way the kid held the guitar a little differently. Like it wasn't just his anymore, but something larger he was temporarily responsible for. And you could see it in the way the listener paused before speaking, choosing words carefully, not because he needed to impress, but because he understood that this moment mattered. It's strange how meaning works like that. A single song can live 100 different lives without changing a single note, which brings up a question worth sitting with. Can a song mean something completely different depending on who's listening? Because meaning isn't locked inside the music itself. It's carried by the person hearing it. That's why this moment felt deeper than a performance. It wasn't about talent meeting opportunity. It was about understanding meeting understanding. And this kind of connection doesn't come from shortcuts. It doesn't come from overnight success or sudden recognition. It comes from time. From repetition, from patience, from showing up even when progress feels invisible. The kid didn't wake up one day able to express everything he felt through sound. That took slow work, quiet effort, and the listener didn't suddenly recognize the power of the song in that moment either. That understanding came from years of living with it, carrying it, and watching it change meaning as life changed. Which naturally leads back to something many people struggle to see clearly. Do you think most people underestimate slow progress or overestimate quick wins? And why? Because what happened here wasn't fast. It just looked fast from the outside. From the inside, it was years of emotion, experience, and growth finally overlapping in the same place at the same time. That overlap is rare. And it only happens when people keep going long enough for it to become possible. The kid didn't gain something new in that moment. He realized the value of what he already had. And the listener didn't give something away. He received something he didn't know he was missing. That's the reframing. The moment stopped being about a street performance. It became about shared meaning. About how art travels further than its creator ever intends. About how patience quietly prepares people for moments they don't see coming. And once that realization settles in, the story isn't about the song anymore. It's about what happens next. Now that both of them understand what that song truly carries. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no signal for it. No announcement. No clear moment where everything suddenly became bigger. It just grew. A few more people slowed down. Someone stopped walking entirely. A small circle formed without anyone deciding to form it. The sound of the guitar carried a little further now. Not because it was louder, but because people were actually listening. The kid adjusted his stance, barely noticeable. Not out of nerves, but awareness. He could feel the space around him change. The air felt heavier, like something was settling in. The other man stayed close, but didn't take over. He didn't guide. He didn't interrupt. Because this wasn't about turning a street corner into a stage. It was about sharing a moment without stealing it. The kid began to play again. Not rushed, not hesitant. The same song, but carried differently now. His fingers moved with more confidence. Not because someone important was watching, but because he felt supported. Like the music had room to exist without needing to prove itself. People around them stopped checking their phones. Traffic noise faded into the background. Even conversations nearby lowered in volume. Naturally, without being asked. This wasn't chaos. It was focus. The kind that happens when everyone senses they're witnessing something honest. The crowd grew, but no one pushed forward. No one shouted. No one tried to insert themselves into the moment. They understood instinctively that this wasn't about them, and that restraint made everything stronger. The kid didn't look out at the people watching. He looked at the guitar, at the strings, at the space where sound becomes meaning. The other man listened the same way, quietly, attentively, as if nothing else in the world required his attention right now. What made the moment powerful wasn't the number of people standing there. It was the shared stillness. Time felt slower. Not dramatic, just deliberate. This was the kind of escalation that doesn't rely on volume or spectacle. It relies on presence. On allowing something real to happen without forcing it to be more than it is. And in that space, between sound and silence, between effort and recognition, something settled into place. Not an ending, not a climax, but a shared understanding. The kind that only forms when people let a moment grow naturally without rushing it toward something bigger. And once that understanding existed, everything that followed carried a different weight, because it wasn't built on noise. It was built on attention. Moments like this don't end when the sound stops. They linger even after people start moving again, after the street returns to its normal rhythm. Something stays behind, not something you can point to, something you feel. The kid packed up his guitar the same way he always did. No dramatic exit. No sudden realization that life had changed forever. Just the same careful routine he'd practiced countless times before. But inside, something had shifted. He hadn't gained fame. He hadn't skipped ahead. He hadn't suddenly become someone else. What he gained was quieter than that. He gained confirmation. The kind that tells you the path you're on isn't wasted, even when it feels slow, even when it feels invisible. The other man drove away, but he didn't leave the moment behind either. What he heard on that street didn't fade once the noise returned. It followed him because it reminded him of something simple and easily forgotten. Why it all mattered in the first place. That's how ripple effects work. They don't announce themselves. They move forward quietly, shaping choices that come later. Which raises an important question. Do you believe one small moment can actually change the direction of a life? Because change doesn't always look like transformation in real time. Sometimes it looks like staying the course when you might have quit. Like practicing one more day. Like showing up again next week. And that connects to something many people struggle to see clearly. We often celebrate sudden success. The breakthrough. The shortcut. But what actually carries people forward is usually slower. Which brings us to a second question worth thinking about. Do you think most people underestimate slow progress or overestimate quick wins, and why? Because the moment on that street didn't create something new. It strengthened something that already existed. It didn't replace years of effort. It validated them. And validation can be powerful, not because it guarantees anything, but because it gives people permission to keep going. That's the ripple. A conversation influences a decision. A decision shapes a habit. A habit changes a direction, and long after the crowd forgets the moment, those ripples continue moving, quietly, steadily, toward a future no one on that street could fully see yet. Some moments don't need a headline, they don't arrive with certainty, and they don't leave with a clear ending. They exist quietly, in between everything else, and only reveal their meaning over time. What happened on that street wasn't important because of who was involved, or because people stopped to watch. It mattered because it showed how easily we overlook the moments that shape us the most. The kid didn't walk away knowing where his life would lead. The listener didn't leave with a plan or a promise. All they shared was understanding. And sometimes, that's enough. We often expect change to feel dramatic, like a turning point you recognize immediately, like a clean break between before and after. But real change rarely works that way. More often, it settles in quietly, like a thought you carry with you, or a feeling you can't quite explain. But that influences the choices you make later. That's what made this moment meaningful. It didn't demand attention. It didn't force a result. It simply existed long enough to matter. And that's something worth remembering. Because connections don't require perfect timing. They don't require perfect conditions. They just require presence. Someone willing to show up. Someone willing to listen. The street returned to normal that day. People moved on. The noise came back. But the meaning didn't disappear. It stayed with the people involved, shaping what came next in ways no one watching could fully measure. That progress doesn't need to be fast to be real. That attention, when given sincerely, can change more than we realize. In a world that moves quickly and rewards shortcuts, there's something powerful about slowing down long enough to notice what's right in front of us. Because sometimes without planning it, without forcing it, without even realizing it, we find ourselves exactly where we're supposed to be. And those are the moments that stay with us long after the street has gone quiet.